And, Dana, my agenda in having you come on to talk about kind of makers and crafting on Twitch is, partly because I consider myself to be a maker in the sense that the 3D printing and the robot building side, but I love thinking about Twitch as an educational platform. And a lot of my experiences of kind of makers and crafting on Twitch is me kind of learning. It might not be immediate learning. Like it's not something I'm learning because I need to know it right now, but something that I'm learning because it's fascinating. And that's where last time, I touched upon the computerized sewing machines and the way that computerized sewing machines, I've found a few streams like that blew my mind. But you also tend to dabble in maker streams and crafting streams as part of your content. So I'd love to hear both what in the genre attracts you, but also, as a streamer, what your experience has been in terms of producing and doing those types of streams and the tips that you would offer, to other people who are interested in producing that content and engaging that content.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on and recognizing that I'm a crafter. I definitely want to step up my crafting streams a bit. I tend to feel more comfortable streaming games. And I'm a little more vulnerable with sharing my makers and crafting streams. But I have a lot of thoughts, but I'm going to focus on your two first questions so I don't miss them. What attracts me to the genre of sewing or just crafting in general? Yeah, that's a really good question. So just being able to tangibly produce something is very relaxing. And sometimes I'll get caught up in my head. And sewing just uses a lot of different parts of my brain, but it also gets me out of my head and into my body. And yeah, it's also just something that's kind of difficult enough that I can continue to learn, but I also can feel satisfied with my current knowledge. And I know enough to be producing products now, or I can continue to, try to be better at that. I had so many good thoughts of what to say last night, and I'm finding myself a little bit flustered.
That's all right. It'll come. Take your time.
Yeah, I think that it's ultimately what I probably should pivot towards, because I have a lot of skills, but that's one of the skills that I have that a lot of people don't have. And I think if maybe getting on to Twitch to do gaming was just a gateway for me to get into doing more tutorials and educational type streams. I'm not afraid of how difficult it's going to be, but there is when it comes to my setup, I'm very limited, right? I have this is my room. So I have two large desks and, the green screen and all the equipment and two sewing machines, two monitors. There's a lot going on. And so right now my sewing streams are more considered a special event, and they don't happen regularly because it would take a lot of Tetrising everything around my room to get it right. Most women that are in the makers and crafting realm that I aspire to have an entire garage or studio with all of their stuff in it. And I'm still kind of compartmentalizing all of my creative sides and trying to make them fit together. So I'm super excited about it. I think that it's going to be difficult to engage people because it can be a bit boring sometimes and it's repetitive. But I find that the name is eluding me right now. The quilter that you linked us to,
quilter.
She, I'm gonna take a few notes from her, and I was observing having the two point of views, having one kind of directly into the machine to see the fine details of what you're doing when you go under the needle. And then the larger view is kind of just her in the room so you can see like what it takes to be cutting patterns and all of the work that goes into it. But just to wrap up everything I said, like, yeah, I think that we need more.
Oh, I think Dana hit her USB hub. There you go. It had tremendous dramatic effect because you're like, and then I think you should, and it's like Dana's $1 billion advice. Quick commercial break just to add tension to the feed. And so while Dana reloads, I just want to amplify something that she just said, which I thought was really important, which is the way in which we split attention during our feeds. So for example, you know, Dana was describing that when you're actually crafting, right, you're focusing on the crafting, whether working a sewing machine, whether using your hands. And so it's tough to then be paying attention to the chat, let alone sort of engaging the chat.
Can you guys hear me again?
Yes, we can.
Yep.
I was just saying that was a fantastic cliffhanger. Everyone is literally on the edge of their seats.
But you kind of picked up on something that I didn't actually say, but I danced around, and that like you're juggling a lot of things, and like as a seamstress or whatever we classify as a sewist, like I just do things with my machine. I'm used to multitasking, right? Like I'm using both hands, I'm using my eyes. Sometimes I'm using my freaking elbows and weird shit. Like I'm using my leg to drive the actual machine. So having my setup completely dialed in is really important, because one thing falls out and you're anxious and you're messing up and you're not paying attention and making errors. So just lots of practice, just lots of like failing faster and making mistakes that embarrass me enough to fix them. I keep trying to like make it concise, but I have a lot of thoughts and feelings.
That's okay.
On this. So you guys met me kind of at the point where I'm still trying to build and work on that side of my stream.
But that's kind of our agenda here, right? Is to provide a space for people to think out loud and then get encouragement in terms of, yeah, this sounds like an excellent content strategy. Because, you know, what we talked about last week is that games are saturated. And while games, I think, play a role in a streamer's content repertoire, and Dana, you said something which, again, I think I'd always had subconscious, but you brought to the surface, which is that games help you develop the comfort level in streaming. And games are kind of an on-ramp to help you develop your online persona. But then it's good to diversify into stuff that, you know, you really enjoy doing and that are maybe a little harder and sort of push your comfort level and push your production skills. I mean, Dana, by all means, I'd love to hear you elaborate, but if you want a moment to kind of gather your thoughts, I mean,
I could keep talking. I guess I got
go
lost in the words and thought maybe we were short for time, but
not at all. Go ahead.
No, I've same feelings on that. Just getting enough practice under my belt to not feel afraid, and because when you have the screen on, like I know my viewers hearing me make mistakes, but like sometimes you are juggling so many things at once that one thing breaks and your whole brain just stops working, and you might just like pause and not be talking, or there's all sorts of weird things that could come up when you're live that you don't have as much control over. And so I'm not a machine. I'm a person with emotions, and I make mistakes and feel vulnerable around it sometimes. So, but yeah, there's just a lot of moving parts. Like I would almost want more moderators in that situation, or even maybe like an on-site person, like a roommate or something that could be behind the scenes and go move that light in the corner for me if I need it or something like that, because I'm doing everything by myself, like completely alone. And there's not always like, even there's just things that you don't think of until they happen, and then you have to fix it for next stream. So
and you've kind of evoked that notion of like the one-woman band, right? Working the drum and playing the keyboards and doing vocals. Like that is kind of what you're doing as streamer, is that you're both producing the content and producing the show, and in this context, making something. I mean, it's multiple layers of attentional complexity.
Right. And so like this, I think this all hits on what you were saying earlier, Jesse, is that Twitch is a great tool for learning because you don't have to be perfect. And when, right. And maybe some of like some of the most interesting things about why platforms like Twitch or even YouTube, whatever, are great is because you see the realness, the vulnerability in making stuff, right? Like, and I think that's the best way to learn is by making mistakes, I think, right? Because then you learn what not to do.
Yeah.
And I think
Cool.
seeing that realness in on a platform like Twitch is what's great. I think there is an added complexity because I, as a maker, started being a maker, or like traditionally, I'm trained as a maker of videos. It's like, right, like a photographer before everybody had a $1 million camera in their pocket, an editing suite in their pocket, right? So, so you're doing that, and then you're making something like the complexity of it. So it's harder, but at the same time, it makes for interesting moments of how to juggle that. And I think that's what makes
that's part of the learning curve.
Right,
yeah.
right?
Well, I think it.
Go ahead, Dana.
Yeah, I think it just makes it more attractive for people that are newcomers because like they're looking at me and I'm someone that I don't quite consider myself like a novice or anything, but I'm passing beginner into intermediate for the last couple of years. And kind of also thinking out loud about just the things I'm saying as I'm going, like oopsie daisy, or oh, didn't mean to do that, or just kind of making the mistakes seem more approachable and fun and a part of the process.
Yeah.
Because when you first start, you kind of just think that you suck at it and you shouldn't be doing it if you make mistakes. And it's like, even people that have been doing it for 12 plus years are still laughing at the mistakes that they make and having to seam rip an entire thing apart and wasting 12 hours of work or like, so yeah, just offering an example for people that you're allowed to make those mistakes.
And what I'm sort of hearing from your comments, Dana, is, and I'm paraphrasing here, is
please
if you're not making mistakes, you're not doing it right. Right? That you almost want the privilege that we have here, the learning opportunity is that, you know, rather than sort of stay in your safe zone, you do want to push yourself to the point that you start fucking up and you start making mistakes with the right support structure, of course. That's where the roommate, that's where the production crew around you would be great. Right? But I think there is a need to be vulnerable and to try to move forward. And I do have to acknowledge Colossus, who, you know, has not only been posting in the chat, but subscribed. And I almost want to make a joke that, like, what do you do when you're on a panel and you want to put your hand up? You subscribe to the channel. It's a great way of getting attention. But then I felt, no, I can't reward that type of attention. That's just wrong. But Colossus, I mean, you know, do you want to weigh in here? Because you are also a maker. And just yesterday, I saw you making media on stream, right? And sort of, you know, as you were learning in terms of some of the effects and some of the features you were doing, you know, that's sort of what I always preach in terms of each one teach one, that you were sort of, you know, sharing as you were learning. So, I mean, what do you have thoughts on what makes a good maker stream, or what you like when watching maker or crafting streams?
Well, if anyone's ever watched me edit, you'll know that one of the things I like to say is that the best way to figure out what new thing you should do is to fuck it up. And so you start by you start with a goal, and then you might end up accomplishing something like different than you expected. You'll be like, oh, that's a cool way to transition into this, or like, what if I overlaid this on top of that? And often the mistakes you make turn out to be some of the coolest things. So with streamers and especially makers, I'd say is like to go out there and just make mistakes. Like I was saying here in the chat, I used to have trouble streaming for like an hour before my stream time. I'd have like everything pulled up on my computer. I'd have it all like ready to go for so long before I was. But over time, I'm kind of getting more comfortable with it. And as long as you manage to beat that part of yourself that says, like, oh, no one's interested in what I'm doing, no one likes my vibe, you're not going to know unless you go out and do it, right? And like, if you've got people coming into your chat and leaving, that's something you need to change about your stream, you know, because there's a lot of people that want to blame the system or the algorithm when they're just not making good content. But yeah, I mean, create in front of people. As long as no one's backseat driving, I find it's not too stressful. Dana's thing might be different because it's more of a crafting thing. So people might feel more inclined to pipe up. But whenever I'm doing video, people know that like it's going to take a sec for it to look the way it needs to, you know, whereas they might be like, oh, what are you doing with that stitch over? I don't know. Like, I don't know how it's different for someone making something physical versus art stuff, like less.
Well, it's all art stuff, but
it's all art stuff.
Whether you're using a tool that needs to render or whether you're using a tool that needs to stitch.
Yes, whether you both have different pacing. Whether you're physically rendering or digitally rendering your art. There we go.
Can I just
There's
oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dana.
No. I wrote down what I wanted to say, so go ahead.
What a professional!
Forget thing. I have like a whole list of notes, y'all.
Very wise.
Scrapbook moment.
Sorry, Stro, go ahead.
I was just gonna say this reminds me of one of my favorite sayings in recent times is a boat is safe in the harbor, but that's not the point of a boat. Right? You got to go out there and you gotta kind of try and do stuff and not be afraid to make mistakes. Because I think all artists, you know, are always doubtful of their creations because it is always a journey to the next thing. And it's self-doubt is one of the things that I've always been, you know, struggling with. But then at some point I had the epiphany of like, you know what? I'm loving doing this. It doesn't really matter. And I'm still learning that all the time, right? But anyways, sorry.
The process is the purpose.
Exactly. Yeah. So I wrote down, I really liked that you said each one teach one. But have you guys heard of wabi-sabi? Does anybody know that terminology?
It sounds familiar, but no.
Yeah, so it's kind of like cracks are where the light come in. Or like you might have seen like a broken ceramic bowl and then they will fill the crack with gold. Right. And it's like this beautiful bowl that's now got this gold feature. So that's kind of just piggybacking. That's another saying similar.
It makes broken things more valuable, right? Because they put gold in like broken ceramics and stuff. Is that what it's called? That's the art form?
Yeah, I mean just kind of the philosophy around like making and mending as well, that things can still have value if they're broken and fixed.
I mean, that kind of makes me want to go look to find people who do repair streams where all they do is repair and restore things, because I always find that to have a vibe that just makes me feel good. It just helps me.
Well, yeah, there's like, I was really into upcycling for a while, and there's definitely a lot of resources still left on Earth that are very valuable. You know, the planned obsolescence that's going on with electronics is
an environmental disaster.
Yeah, I mean, from I wear a lot of different hats, and I do still like technology, but if I'm wearing my makers and crafting hat or talking to all my sewing old lady friends, like that's not good for us, you know. Like we definitely want to be reusing materials, and lucky for fabric, it holds up pretty well. You just wash it and recut it, and it's just a matter of convincing people that it's worthy, you know. It's not brand new, so you have to be into the idea of mending and reusing things.
Well, and that brings me to another question I had for you, Dana. And, you know, I am conscious of time because I do want to get into talking about political streaming. So feel free to use this question as an opportunity to also add any of the other notes or ideas that you wanted to share.
Sure.
But at the same time, I would love to have you back on the show at some point to revisit kind of the role of makers and streamers. So don't feel that, you know, if an hour, 2 hours from now, you're like, oh my God, I had this brilliant point I had to share. We would love to have you back. So please do not feel any sense of artificial scarcity. But I'm curious, both on a personal level and in terms of the streamers that you've watched, whether there's a kind of marketing component to the way in which a maker or a crafter streams their products. Because that's what I thought of when you just sort of said in terms of upcycling, whether someone perceives value. Because I've seen this with Unruly Quilter, that, you know, she'll take time to make an elaborate quilt, and then she can put a premium on selling that quilt on Etsy because, you know, her audience has watched the labor of love that she's put into it. And so there is a kind of very subtle but equally profound marketing that is her stream, and that is the way in which she's making her products. Is that something that you've observed, or that you even kind of strategize in terms of your own kind of future ambitions or practices when it comes to your own streaming efforts?
Yes, and I think you're super clairvoyant, because it was kind of what I was trying to get around to touching on, and I kept getting distracted. Totally. I think that in the sense that some of the other gaming streams are maybe more engaging, like, hey, I just won, and then somebody sends you 100 bits or something. The struggle with the makers and crafting is kind of finding a way to make it monetize it a little more, you know, and you might get people coming through as viewers, but ad revenue is like 30 cents a week or something. It's not a lot. So I think the genius thing that a lot of creators are doing is they're live working on commissions. And so you find yourself in an arena where anything that you make from streaming is just the cherry on top. Yeah. And you're focused on your work, and the person gets to see what it's really like to be making money doing that craft. They might see you struggling. They might see you frantically pulling your hair out, so you're going to miss a deadline. Like, it's more authentic. And I feel like it would probably take a lot of the pressure off of not knowing what to be sewing on stream or how to plan it out. And it's giving someone a tangible result, like something that they can actually buy and hold on to. And kind of to touch on what you were saying before, I'm from Austin, and, you know, before the pandemic, I was really involved in like the festival and art scene here. And I would go to live music events and sell, like, I would vend clothing. And this was when I was doing eBay, and it was like secondhand and upcycled vintage and things like that. But through doing that, I got really involved with like live painters. And they definitely made a lot more money on the prints that they would do live at a show, because you come back around and you're like, wow, I saw you start this and it's now completed. And so them seeing every step of the painting made them that much more attached to it. And, you know, not only did they enjoy watching it, but now they can like own something that they were a part of. So it's genius. I feel like it's a really good way to still be making money and not be worried about, you know, engaging with chat enough to make enough money. Like, you're like, here, I'm working on this sewing commission. You guys can watch me and enjoy it. Or if not, I'm still going to be doing my job. This is it. This is what I'm working on today.
Well, and you combine that with some of the emotional and community aspects that we've discussed in terms of Twitch. And it, for me as a content creator, it sort of makes me think that this is a workplace, that I'm not necessarily going to make money from doing this work, but if I bring the work that someone else is already paying me for into this workplace, it kind of makes not just the work a little more enjoyable, but maybe opens up new opportunities or opens up new doors.
Totally.
And that's where I do have to give props to Colossus, who, as we're having this chat, he's in the chat selling his video editing services. So, you know, more power to you in terms of working that community and working it around. And similarly, Stro, I hope that you've got some insights in terms of the work that you do, that you could be streaming it as you do it. right? As a way
Yeah.
of kind of facilitating that activity.
Again, I'm really new to Twitch and streaming, and I'm still trying to get my head around, you know, because what Dana was saying earlier about this is it's just putting a proper thing out is a lot of work on its own. So I want to make sure that I can do it naturally and enjoy my time as I'm make whatever it is I'm doing, right? Whether it's my silk screening or my painting or maybe editing, doing videos for like I don't or is it the sport, right? Like I don't
Yeah.
know if I want to be putting it all out there. I think it's good to be giving people exactly what they came for. So I really haven't figured that out. But yeah, I mean the opportunities are there because you can now connect, and I've learned so much from watching people do things online, right? So yeah, I don't know what that thing's going to be yet, but definitely I think the opportunities are there. And I just want to make sure when I am going to be streaming about, I'm going to be doing it naturally the way you do, but by doing this, right? Because you're, this is what you do, or this is what Dana does with her work as a maker. So I haven't figured it out yet as to what I want to stream,
But I think,
and
Stro,
how I'm going to use the platform.
I think, Stro, the moral for me here is don't think about it too much. Just try, go fall flat on your face, right? Go try different experiments, different
Yeah.
attempts. And this is where I
So
do
I was
have
thinking-
to hold on. This is where I do have to, give a big shout out to all the people in the chat because, while we've been having this discussion, there's been parallel discussions in the chat around some of the ingredients that sort of help streamers.
There
And,
sure have.
I think, Dana, you have been an absolute fountain of knowledge and really valuable insights, not just in terms of makers and crafting, but in terms of streaming in general. And I think some of the skills and some of the characteristics of streaming. I mean, Stro, do you have? If you want to make your point very briefly, I'm going to then turn to Dana and give her an opportunity to say any last things on this topic before we then throw to Colossus, to Logan, to talk about political streaming.
So to briefly answer your question, I think the best idea I've had about what to stream is something that's new, and with my kids learning how to play an instrument. Like we got
Right
a
on.
keyboard, and I think that would be really cool to go through a lesson of how they and I develop learning music, because I've always wanted to do that.
Right on. Dana, any last thoughts about makers or crafting in general before we wrap up this segment?
Sure. Just this idea that it used to take me a lot to get sewing because I had to go out to the garage and be completely alone, and now I will never sew alone again.
That's fantastic.
Just this idea that sometimes like bringing Twitch in is just to have somebody to hang out with and be coexisting with, because you might not want to sit in the sewing room by yourself for 8 hours. You might want to have your friends around.
Would you say that you no longer need to go solo?
Oh my god!